Well, considering I've never really played any Zelda games before, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good overall story. I liked how Link just kind of wakes up and your goal is to save Princess Zelda, but then, the Divine Beast gets thrown in, all these side quests get thrown in. I liked all the characters you meet. The Yiga clan was really cool in my opinion. And I don't know, I just thought it was a very diverse story, and for such a trend-setting open world first Nintendo Switch game, I enjoyed it. The only negatives I would say is I feel like some points could have been expanded upon more. I don't really know how the story's played out in the other Zelda games, but I feel like the Divine Beasts, although I enjoyed playing them, there probably could have been a little more stories to like the dungeons and stuff like that, like how they were formed, stuff along those lines. But no, honestly, I think that it was a really in-depth story with the characters, and it was entertaining to me, a Zelda noob, so I like it.
Wow, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The story, when I first grabbed my game, I never thought it would be this big, this unique, this exciting. The story certainly has done before. I mean, with the time traveling stuff, for example, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. But this time is different because we already existed 100 years ago, and now we're back with almost no memories. So we start to find out our past and really get to know our characters, and the cutscenes, wow, they are amazing. We start to know more about Link's past and also meet new characters like the champions, and wow, they all have different personalities, and that's something I love. Like, for example, Mifa is caring and she's lovely. She's not waifu, but she's lovely. Daruk is like this big guy, and he's all funny. He's like an uncle. When I play the game, I feel like he's an uncle, and that's very cool. And that's something you don't see a lot in these games, and well, the games nowadays. Also, how the Guardians and the Divine Beast used to be good. That's something that really caught me off guard, because I thought Ganon was the one that created the Guardians at first, but seeing how they were created for good and then transformed, I think that was pretty epic and a good decision by Nintendo.
Where do I start? There's a lot of good things about the Breath of the Wild story, but there are a couple things I'd like to mention that kind of make it fall a little bit short from what it could have been. As we know, like, Breath of the Wild isn't exactly the most story-driven game in the franchise, but it does have its good story points, and it's also made a lot of fans cry and smile and a lot of other emotions. The positive parts about it include the fact, like, oh my gosh, I'm going off on a tangent, but let me get my thoughts together here. The story, it's good. It's like really, really good. It's got a lot of really interesting characters, very diverse. You got Rivali, Urbosa, Mifa, my personal favorite, by the way, Daruk, and a bunch of other interesting characters that play supporting roles in this story. It's kind of interesting to see how they all interact, and also you kind of picked up on their character traits as time goes on through the game. But this is where it kind of falls short, is that there's not really enough like storytelling going into it at times. There's not really any sort of direct plot unless you go back and find like cutscenes of the memories in the game, and that kind of takes time, and you kind of end up doing it out of order either way, unless you know already where everything is. So I don't know. I can't really say much just on personal preference, but overall the story is really, really good. It just needs more, is the point I'm kind of trying to drive at.
For what there was, it was pretty good. But I have a lot of issues with it. But I'll explain why. Basically, I believe that Breath of the Wild is the only true Legend of Zelda. The game is purely focused on Zelda, and that is just story-wise. Every cutscene or memory includes Zelda in some way, shape, or form, except for when Link wakes up from his 100-year slumber. And they don't go into very depth, and they're not really cutscenes or story. It's just like somebody reading a book. It's like if Link went to socials class and he learned about history, but he was actually a part of history. So I don't think it's that good. For what there was, it's good, but compared to every other Zelda game and being a modern Zelda title, I feel like they should have done story way better. And it's honestly just a little disappointing to an long-time Zelda fan. And lots of the characters felt like blank slates, and the only one who was like really a character was Zelda and maybe Rivali, and everyone else was just your generic like characters and stuff. And it wasn't like I never ever felt connected with any of the characters like any other Zelda game, like whatsoever. I had no emotion towards any character besides Zelda, and that was still very faint. Basically, I think they could have just done it way better. Like, just put a little more effort into it, and maybe have a story while the game goes on. Like, you have your memories, whole separate thing. You all also have cutscenes that go on while you play the game, because Link still seems like a dude with no memories when you finish the game, even though he's gathered the memories. Just seems like a caveman you just ran around, played as, got a motorbike and stuff, and just like mindlessly killed stuff. I think it was just very poor story, and for such a big world, the story was empty. The empty canvas, the story. Okay, I'm done.
Alright, so basically I hated Breath of the Wild. It sucked. Alright, I'm kidding. Alright. Okay, so Breath of the Wild, this is a game that came out like almost 2 years ago now, and it's crazy to think that it's been out for that long, but I remember the first like day it came out. My favorite part about this game, I would have to say, is definitely the gameplay aspect within the storyline. The storyline was pretty unique, actually. It was something that we hadn't really seen before, where we find out that we have this we have Link, who found out that 100 years prior to his existence, they had this great evil Calamity Ganon, and he was taking over the kingdom, and he was sealed within the Hyrule Castle. And this whole storyline with the Calamity Ganon, I thought was very interesting. And this was something that I actually really enjoyed. And within the storyline, I think it was really interesting to go out and get these shrines instead of your typical formula of Zelda games, doing your dungeons or whatnot. And I liked the really the really cool and free world, open world type aspect of this game, whereas for the storyline you didn't really have to follow any specific path, but you were able to kind of pick your own path and kind of choose your own adventure, in a sense, choosing the order in which you were able to do things, which I thought was really cool and made the game feel really unique and really big. And it's a game that you're able to pick up again after beating and restart it, and you'll see something new every time. It's just there's so much packed within this game and within this storyline, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm replaying the game just to be able to do this storyline a little bit differently. I mean, you're able to go to different parts of the game different times, which I thought is really cool. And I just like the way that the whole storyline plays out with going to the divine beasts. And even with the divine beasts, I'm pretty sure you don't have to go in order for them. You can kind of just go in whatever order you choose. So I think that was a great addition to this game. And along with having this very unique storyline to this game that is a kind of a concept that we hadn't really seen before, I think the addition of this storyline plus the open world aspect of the game made it just a phenomenal game. And I think the way that it all panned out was really great. And I would have to say that I truly, really enjoyed this game. For me, this is a quote that this guy Linkachu said to me once. Shout out to Linkachu. But he was saying that he enjoyed the game, but he felt as though it wasn't a true Zelda game, which I can kind of see where he's coming from, because the way the game kind of played, it didn't feel like your typical Zelda game. You know, the story was a whole lot different than, you know, the typical formula of a Zelda game. I mean, it was still based around like the same kind of ideas, but it's just very, very unique and very different. And the way that we had the open world game connected to this whole big storyline with the Calamity Ganon and these divine beasts and all this stuff, it felt like it didn't really feel like a Zelda game to me, honestly. But that's also not a bad thing, because I really enjoyed the direction that they went with the game, even though, you know, it wasn't a you know, typical Zelda game, as, you know, one could say. I think it was a very unique and a very big step for Nintendo to be doing this, to, you know, step out of the comfort zone a little bit and make something completely unique and something that we've never really seen before, this whole open world, open story Zelda game. And I'm really curious to see what they can do with this concept in the future. Maybe we'll see another open world Zelda game come out if Nintendo has any plans for that. So that would be really cool to see, and I'm sure we'll get something similar, because I think the way that they created this game, this format, was very popular among crowds, Zelda fans, and even like non-Zelda fans. People who just play, you know, Switch games, maybe just picked it up because they thought it looked cool. And I'm pretty sure that Nintendo will, you know, recognize this and maybe implement these aspects of the game and the storyline within, you know, future games. And we'll have to see how things pan out for Nintendo. But hopefully we can get something cool for upcoming Zelda games. And yeah, to kind of wrap it up, I enjoyed Breath of the Wild. I thought the storyline was very cool. I'm not going to spoil anything unless, you know, you haven't played the game, but I would highly recommend picking it up. Great game. You will not be disappointed. And yeah.
When I think about like the story of Breath of the Wild, honestly, I'm not disappointed with it at all. I mean, when I first got the game, like on release date, and I started playing it, not only like was I intrigued by the story, like how we had to, well, even though it's fighting Ganon again, but it's a different take on him. It's the Calamity form of him, and instead of, you know, not just getting stronger, but you also have to awaken the divine beasts again, like reclaim them, like get rid of all the Blight Ganons, and also just try to, you know, increase your hearts, increase your stamina, and learn more about what happened in those 100 years that you've been asleep. Honestly, I feel like that's definitely a good story element right there in itself, because you as the player, you're learning along with Link as you continue throughout the game, as you meet some of like the NPCs and learn about like what they had to say about let's say the Calamity, or what they remember about the hero from 100 years ago, even though that's you. But yeah, honestly, I really liked how the story like flowed for me. Like it wasn't like it didn't like halt when you got to like certain areas. For me, it just like it went smoothly. Like every single time I like got a divine beast back, or I found like a secret area, like it just connected with the story. And I loved the cutscenes, especially like when looking at the memories, like you see how Link interacted with like say the champions, like especially with like Rivali, even though Rivali hated him pretty much. And of course I hate Rivali for that reason. But yeah, you know, it's just showing how Link as a person can grow throughout a game, pretty much, that you just try out and see how far you can go, honestly. And that's what I really appreciate about the story. And I feel like a lot of people say they don't really like how the game ended with, you know, Zelda's just like, oh, Link, do you remember me and all that? I think that's a perfect way to end it. Like, you save, not only do you save her, but you save what's left of Hyrule. And if you've gotten all the memories back, you restore you restore Hyrule to what you remember it. You restore it to what you remember it as it was, if that makes sense. You get your memories. You remember all the people that you interacted with. You remember all the things you did with them, all the relationships that you created, especially with Mifa. Like that one cutscene where she was healing him, and it just showed how much that she loved him as a person, and how much of an impact that he had on her. And it goes even as far as let's say like her brother Sidon. Like when you meet him for the first time, he's like, "You look familiar," and then like as you progress through that part of the story, he's like, "Oh wait, I remember you. You're the one that my sister loved. You're the one who gave her hope. You're the one who gave hope to everyone because you're the hero." And once you realize that, it kind of puts a deeper meaning on the term hero itself. I mean, when you think of heroes, you think of someone who's always, always up to the challenge and everything like that. And Link fits that description right there. Even though he's like had his struggles, even though he fell to that guardian 100 years ago in the story, he still came back. Even though he didn't remember anything that happened to him, he still rose to the challenge. He still fought all those monsters and guardians, and and he still fought Ganon, and he won. And that's as a player, I can fully appreciate that kind of story. That's what I liked about it. What I didn't really like about it is, there's actually not that much I could say, honestly. I love the story. But as far as that goes, and I'm pretty sure a lot of us would agree with this, we don't know exactly where it fits in the timeline. And I would say it would go at the very end because it has elements from all other previous games. Like it mentions Twilight Princess, it mentions Skyward Sword, it mentions Ocarina of Time. There's just so much that there's so much previous games that are within this one game, so it's tough to place it on like a certain part of the timeline that's been created. I would say it goes at the end, but then again, it all depends on what Nintendo says. But then again, what they say probably doesn't really match up to what they previously said, so that's always the case with the Zelda timeline. But other than that, there isn't really much that I would say that ruined the story for me. I feel like it's a perfect example, like I said, of a hero and his journey to remember what he lost and, just reclaim what was once his home, pretty much, from Ganon. And yeah, I feel like that's how perfectly the story fits in with this game.
Breath of the Wild story is really good. I really enjoyed the story for what we had. Being able to just run around and explore the world as I pleased, and slowly figuring out who Link was as I journeyed with him, and finding the divine beasts, discovering what they were, and the champions, realizing who the champions were, how they felt about Link, how they related to the princess and Hyrule itself. It was all just really cool, and I really enjoyed especially like tackling those divine beasts and capturing them, and ultimately fighting Calamity Ganon in the end, and saving Zelda, as well as Hyrule itself. Like that whole concept of the story was just so cool. And I guess a part of the story would also be like the shrines, because the shrines and towers, they kind of relate to the story because they all came alive when Link used the Sheikah Slate, because of like the hero awakening, if that makes sense. And it kind of encourages Link to go into these shrines as well, so he can get more powerful for the finale of Calamity Ganon alongside the divine beasts. So it was like really cool, and I really enjoyed that and how that all kind of tied together. But negatively, I would say the divine beasts, while they were cool dungeons in concept because you got to like use the Sheikah Slate as like a 3D map kind of thing for all 4 of the divine beasts, plus Hyrule Castle was like a 3D interactive map that you could use, and control the divine beast by like rotating stuff within the beast or the beast itself in a different position, and it would help you navigate and like do puzzles and stuff. That was really cool, and I really enjoyed that. However, I felt it was kind of lame that we couldn't find any other dungeons within the game. But that's like the only thing. We'll talk about that another time. But story-wise, I thought it was pretty good. And negatively, I would say that Breath of the Wild's story, while it was really good for what we had, the story that we did get didn't feel like an experience, because for the story of Breath of the Wild, in order to keep the free world like around, you don't experience any of the story that happens. You just kind of watch it happen because of the memory system in the game, because you have to go around the world and find these different memories based off pictures that you get on the Sheikah Slate. And when you find these locations, you kind of get an epiphany of a memory that you remember with Zelda, and you don't ever really experience this. It's just something you watch. There's no interactive, not even like interactive text or anything like in the previous games. It's just like you sit here and you watch a cutscene about the background characters or whatever, and then you go back to the main game, and that's all you do. And while I did enjoy the cutscenes and I thought it was really cool for the story, I didn't truly get to experience this story, which made it feel lacking and kind of empty, especially towards the end of the game after you defeat Dark Beast Ganon. But besides that, I would say the story is like, it's like a 6 out of 10 for me, maybe 7.